Welcome to Awas on Wire. Today, we're talking about Wan Fayhsal, Wan Ahmad Kamal's claims regarding the formation of the unity government after the 15th general election. Okay, let's jump right in because, well, this is quite something. We're looking at a really pivotal moment just after general election 15, a huge political maneuver, or maybe the lack of one, that basically set the course for the government we have now. Faysal's claim is that this whole setup exists because one person, allegedly, made a single decision that just shut down another possibility entirely.
It really is a crucial point in recent political history we're dissecting here. We're looking at these remarks from Wan Fayhsal, the Member of Parliament from Machang. He's talking about Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin, the Perikatan National Chairman, and his actions. And the focus is squarely on that really intense period right after G15, when the country ended up with a hung parliament. No single group had a clear majority. Constitutionally, cooperation was needed, but these claims suggest, well, an immediate rejection of that path.
Right, that hung parliament context is absolutely key. And the core claim Faisal makes is, well, it's pretty direct. He's saying Muhyiddin Yassin, as the chairman of Perikatan National, just instantly refused the idea of forming a unity government. Not even like, let's discuss it, but according to this account, an immediate no. And this was before really consulting his own coalition leadership.
Yeah, and the where and when of this alleged refusal adds another layer. Faisal says this happened during Muhyiddin's audience with the Yang di Pertuan Agong Sultan Abdul. So refusing a suggestion from the king, especially in that formal setting, is already significant drama. But the second part, the really critical bit, is the claim that this decision was made right then and there, before the whole issue was even brought to the Perikatan National Supreme Council for discussion. It paints a picture of a unilateral decision, sidestepping the coalition's own process at maybe the most important moment.
Okay, but hang on. In a crisis like that, doesn't a leader sometimes need to make fast, decisive calls? Is it fair to criticize bypassing the council, or is that just, well, the reality of leadership under extreme pressure?
That's definitely the tension here, isn't it? It touches on leadership style. If it was purely about speed, maybe you could argue it was necessary. However, the counterpoint is that the king had specifically commanded the formation of a unity government. It wasn't just a suggestion. It was because the election result demanded cooperation. So, allegedly rejecting that instruction without even consulting your partners. It looks less like quick strategy and more like prioritizing a certain principle, or maybe an assumption, over the constitutional direction and coalition consensus. Faysal's telling frames it more as sticking to a perhaps rigid principle, maybe unnecessarily so.
It really does feel like a moment where the path split. You had Muhyiddin, who, according to this, rejected the unity idea straight away. And then on the other side, you had Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, who accepted the king's call to form a unity government.
And that acceptance, well, it changed everything immediately after. Although it's worth remembering, when Anwar initially formed the government, it was, for all intents and purposes, a kind of minority government at first. It only got the solid majority later by bringing other parties, like Barisan Nasional, into the coalition. That's how they secured the numbers to govern effectively.
And Faisal threw in this really interesting detail, didn't he, about how fluid things were right then. He mentioned that the people, the political figures who first backed Anwar for PM, they were apparently also open to backing Muhyiddin at that exact same time.
Exactly.
Which suggests the support wasn't really locked onto one person. It was maybe more about finding anyone who could form a stable government quickly.
Yeah, it implies the priority was stability, getting an administration up and running after the deadlock. The loyalty seemed somewhat conditional on who could deliver that stability fastest. So, okay, let's dig into why. Why would Muhyiddin, according to Faisal, make this huge decision seemingly alone? Faisal points to two main possibilities.
Let's take the first one he mentions, the idea of it being about principle.
Right. The first possibility brought up was this fundamental principle, or perhaps a deep-seated reluctance, to cooperate with the Democratic Action Party, the DAP. Now, you have to understand the context here. For years, a big part of the political narrative for some groups has been built around opposing DAP. So entering a formal unity government that included DAP would mean crossing a major political red line for many within Perikatan Nasional and their voter base. It might have felt like a betrayal of their core supporters.
Okay, so that's the principal argument. Sticking to the base perhaps over the call for unity. What about the second reason, the numbers game?
The second idea floated was confidence, maybe even overconfidence in their own numbers. Faisal suggested Perikatan Nasional believed they already had, or were extremely close to having, about 115 seats. Now, you only need 112 for a simple majority. So if they truly believed they were that close, maybe just 3 seats away, The thinking might have been, we can get those last few ourselves. We don't need this unity setup, especially if it means compromising on principles like working with DAP. They might have calculated they could still pull it off their own way.
That belief in having 115 seats really sharpens the focus on the big what if, doesn't it? If Muhyiddin had accepted the king's suggestion, maybe put aside that 115-seat hope, what might have happened instead?
And this is where we get into that fascinating, now closed-off possibility. Because the two main coalitions, Pakatan Harapan and Perikatan Nasional, were seen as being so evenly matched. The source used a term suggesting they were neck and neck, as they might say. When political forces are that balanced, sometimes really unusual solutions get talked about.
And that unusual solution was the rotating prime minister idea.
Exactly that. The really high-stakes possibility was that maybe Anwar and Muhyiddin could have agreed to split the term. Perhaps 2.5 years each as prime minister. Think about that. A formal power-sharing mechanism at the very top, designed specifically to reflect that divided election result.
Yeah.
It would have been completely historic for Malaysia. It would have forced constant negotiation between two major rivals. But that whole potential structure, that compromise, was apparently taken off the table with that initial rejection.
Yeah, it certainly paints a picture of a very different government structure. Maybe more accountable, maybe just gridlocked, who knows? But let's think about the coalition itself. If Muhyiddin made this call alone, what about the others in Perikatan Nasional, specifically a major partner like Parti Islamsi Malaysia or PAS? How did they react to supposedly being left out of such a massive decision?
Well, Fayhsal was quite careful in how he talked about this. He didn't explicitly say PAS was unhappy or anything like that. He stated he couldn't speak for them directly. But importantly, he did reiterate his point that the decision to reject the unity government was made single-handedly.
Ah.
So the implication is pretty clear, even without putting words in PAS's mouth. It confirms that key partners within the coalition were seemingly bypassed during that critical moment.
And that's a potential problem for any coalition, isn't it? If the leader makes a call that sets the direction for everyone in this case, choosing opposition over a unity government without bringing major partners like PAS into the loop, it could definitely sow seeds of mistrust down the line. It shows the power a chairman can wield in those chaotic post-election moments, but also the potential cost to internal unity.
Absolutely. That calculation, was it principle over consensus, or was it a strategic gamble based on perceived numbers? That's what makes this whole episode so interesting from a political leadership perspective. It was a time crying out for consensus, yet the path chosen, based on either the anti-DAP stance or the 115-seat belief, was apparently one of immediate non-cooperation.
So it really makes you think, doesn't it? Was this unilateral rejection, as claimed, a necessary stand, a defense of core political lines? Or was it a huge missed opportunity? Could there have been a shared leadership structure, something reflecting that divided vote, if a different decision had been made right at the start?
When you boil it down, the core tension is stark. One person's decision, made very quickly it seems, potentially set the entire course for the current government. And it closed the door on a really radical idea that rotating premiership, which might have been a way to manage such a split electorate, that possibility wasn't even fully debated within the coalition itself, according to this account.
It really underscores how fragile those post-election talks are, especially with a hung parliament. Things can change permanently based on conversations happening behind closed doors. And maybe here's something for you, the listener, to chew on. If rejecting the unity government was about upholding a principle, but ultimately meant Perikatan Nasional didn't lead the government, what principles might leaders today be bending or sacrificing simply to stay in power?
That's always the trade-off, isn't it? Principle versus power.
Remember to like and subscribe for more videos like this.